Welcome, Fuel Milwaukee. Hey, Fuelers, come on in. As you're coming in, go straight to the chat. Tell us what you're excited about for today's conversation. So glad to have you all here. Welcome to today's Race Bridge webinar. My name is Corey Jo Biddle. For those who don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of Fuel Milwaukee and the host of today's Race Bridge conversation. So today's Race Bridge is being done in partnership with Milwaukee Film. And this program is in support of their month-long Black History Day program. I'm sorry, Black History Month programming. And special today is a symposium all about STEM. So ours is the first of 3 webinars that are happening today, all focused on STEM. We have one at 4 o'clock here you see on the screen and another at 6 o'clock. You can see those live on the Milwaukee Film Facebook page. Make sure you check that out. Also go to the Milwaukee Film website to see a whole agenda of their month-long programming. So Milwaukee Film's sponsors have made this possible for them, and I want to help shout them out. Molson Coors, Kuna Mutual Group, Northwestern Mutual, the Northwestern Mutual Data Science Institute, the Milwaukee School of Engineering, and Center for the Advancement of the Humanities at Marquette University. Last but not least, Manpower Group. So big shout out to all of them for their support of Milwaukee Film in this program. Our conversation today, from the Fuel and Race Bridge perspective, is all about STEM careers and the lack of diversity in the STEM industries. We're going to talk today about why that lack of diversity is there, what is the impact of it on the industries and the workforce, the folks that are working there. You know, a little closer to home for each of us is the technology and products that we use every day that are created by teams that are not as diverse as they could be, might not be as useful or productive as they could be. So this issue touches all of us from so many different perspectives. So I'm not the expert on this topic. So we got 4 great people here to help us talk about it. I'm going to introduce our panelists and then we'll start getting into the discussion. Our first panelist is Abim Kawale. He is the VP of Integration and Promoting Journey at Northwestern Mutual. Thank you so much for being here, Abim.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
We have Kamala Goodwin. Dr. Kamala Goodwin is the Dean of STEM and Academic Career Pathways at MATC. Thanks for being here, Dr. Goodwin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Happy to be here.
Nadia Johnson is the CEO and founder of Jet Constellations. Hi, Nadia.
Hello, so glad to be here.
Glad to have you. We also have Leah Ferrari, who is the Talent Placement Manager at IC Stars. Hey.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. You sound great.
Okay, great. Yeah, I actually just lost power like 10 minutes ago, so I'm here joining on my phone and won't really be able to respond to chats, but I'm super excited to be able to join you from my phone and have this conversation.
If we see anything in the chat that's directed towards you, I'll make sure that you see it. Before we hop into the conversation, what I want to do really quickly is show this trailer. So this conversation is really powered and was inspired by this film that's being showed as part of the Milwaukee Film Festival's program, Coded Bias. So I'm going to play this 2-minute trailer so you can get a sense of what the film is all about and what inspired us to have this conversation, and then we'll jump right in. So let's get started.
During my first semester at MIT, I got computer vision software that was supposed to track my face. It didn't work until I put on this white mask. I'm thinking, all right, what's going on here? Is it the lighting conditions? Is it the angle at which I'm looking at the camera, or is there something more? That's when I started looking into issues of bias that can creep into technology.
Our ideas about technology that we think are normal are actually ideas that come from a very small and homogeneous group of people.
Vast amounts of data at incredible speeds.
Everybody has unconscious biases, and people embed their own biases into technology.
This kid got stopped as a result of facial recognition misidentification, and then used that as justification to search you. This is an innocent child.
Racism is becoming mechanized.
Systemic issues are only going to be hardwired into new technologies.
It's not just face classification, it's any data-centric technology.
Every day, we are all being scored.
Who gets hired, who gets housing.
I am making predictions for your life right now.
The people who own the code deploy it on other people, and there is no accountability.
Management analytic towers wanted to install the facial recognition software. Pretty much turn this place into Fort Knox.
The technology is being rapidly adopted, and there are no safeguards.
We are socially controlled in a way that we don't see.
Technology that analyzes faces could be biased, but the company is pushing it anyway.
What demographic is it most effective on?
White men.
Show me that it's going to be fair, that it's legal before you put it out. That's what we don't have yet.
It's going to take people coming together, striving for justice in this age of automation.
Okay. Let's get started. It speaks directly to a lot of what we're talking about here and why this is so important. My first question that I have, as we're going to be talking about careers and the lack of diversity, is that you represent diversity, and I'm curious about how you ended up in your career. What's, if you could give us a quick insight into your path. What has been your path? Nadia, I'll start with you.
Awesome. I'm happy to kick things off. So I definitely didn't wake up one day and was like, computer science is the love of my life. It didn't happen that way at all. I always share this story. It was my father who saw me toying around with a Rubik's Cube sometime in high school, and I had got it down to cool kid. And he said, hey, you know what, if you're good at that, you'll probably be good at algorithms. And, I was like, okay. And so he started to push me or nudge me in that direction. Even still, when I got to college, I found myself majoring in international politics, which is still my love today. And he, again, continued to push me. And finally, I made that pivot into computer science. It was certainly not an easy transition whatsoever, but I'm so grateful that I did. And it's the best career decision that I've made so far for myself. But I think that this is a great example of how representation matters, right? I knew nothing about computer science. I couldn't differentiate Java from a cup of coffee. And so I needed my father, who is a software engineer, there in my life to sort of point or make correlations, right? And I say like, hey, if you're good at that, you might be good in computer science, and introduce me to the field. And so since then, I've made it part of my life's purpose to do the same for folks that look just like me.
Kamala, Dr. Goodwin.
Awesome. Thank you for asking. Well, I have a very non-traditional story. I'm not a formally trained STEM practitioner. My background is in business. I'm a previous business owner of about 10 years. I owned a training organization. And within that training organization, I work with underrepresented businesses in the Milwaukee community, more specifically, child care centers and group homes, and I provided CPR and first aid and state required training for those organizations. With a great partnership with Children's Hospital, all of those child care centers and group homes that were unable to pay for their training, Children's Hospital paid for them. And so that was the beginning of my love and understanding and being an advocate for the underrepresented populations. I transitioned to a doctoral program, leadership in higher ed, where I studied and researched the underrepresentation of STEM in higher ed. And I interwove entrepreneurship into that study. And so out of that was born someone who was an advocate for underrepresentation of all industries, but then my love for STEM grew in learning the benefits of diversity in STEM. And that led me to my role as dean in the STEM pathway at MATC. You're on mute, Corey.
Abim, go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks again for having me. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to share the stage with wonderful panelists like all of you. So for me, there are two things. One is, personal characteristics, I would describe it. For me, there's grit, resilience, and the openness to personal disruption. Because amidst all the things we study, particularly as people of color, you need to have that kind of grit and perseverance, right, and resilience. And that was instrumental in where I am today. I think some of you may know that I grew up in Nigeria, and I remember very well sitting on the couch. I think I was about 7 or 8 or 10 years old. I forget exactly when it is. And I wondered about what it would feel like to be a Wall Street lawyer. Fast forward to 1995, and here I am as a lawyer at the Securities and Exchange Commission. And that's how my career started. So I'm an attorney. I've had a multitude of different types of jobs, which is why I talked about personal disruption is also openness to personal disruption is meant to be a good character trait. But over the years, right, being involved in business in some way, shape, or form and being a regulator, I had seen the dearth of people of color, particularly when it comes to finance and business, high finance. And it's heartening now that we're talking about this and hopefully inspire people to really, immerse themselves in STEM.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Leah?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Corey Joe, to speak on this panel. And I just want to say I'm also honored to be speaking among such great individuals today. So in terms of my career path, I like to say that I've been tech adjacent the entire time. So my first client out of college was Microsoft. I worked at an advertising firm, but kind of in the nerdiest side of advertising. So like numbers side, making recommendations on ad investments, tons of spreadsheets. And since then I've worked with a lot of large and small brands and eventually started working with individuals. I worked at one of the first coding boot camps in the country out in San Francisco for a few years. And then as a boomerang, as I like to call myself, being from the Milwaukee area, and I came back about 10 years later and now serve in my current role with IC Stars Milwaukee, where, we like to say that we find talent, train talent, and put talent to work, largely from underserved communities. The IC and IC Stars stands for Inner City Computer Stars. So that tells you about where we recruit from and what we're looking to equip people with. So I really feel blessed to have this particular role right now because I get to help people, land in those opportunities that they very much deserve, but may not have had the traditional career path. And the traditional career path I've come to realize over my career really means that a lot of things have gone right for you in your life, and they don't necessarily go right for many other people. And so that was kind of an awakening that I went through later in my brief life. I'm only in my 30s, but I started to notice the lack of diversity in the environments that I was in my earlier mid-20s, and got more passionately involved with it when I was out in the Bay Area, and then was pleasantly surprised when I came back to Milwaukee to see so many people, paying attention to this. And so I'm just glad that, we can have this conversation today and kind of talk about why aren't there more people of color in technology, and how we can all be a part of the solution, because it's going to take discomfort, it's going to take disruption, to Abim's point, and we all need to be a part of it or nothing's going to change.
Yeah. When I was marketing and doing the research for this event, I put some stats in the marketing. So most of the people that register for this have seen it, but I'll just bring it up to kind of help paint the picture of what we're talking about. 2/3 of professionals in STEM are white or Asian men. So that leaves 27% of STEM jobs to women, only 9% to African Americans, and just 7% to Hispanic and Latino people. So when I started to kind of look at what does this mean, and then I found this stat. So STEM jobs will increase, or will have increased by 2024 by 8.9%. So that's pretty much double the rate of non-STEM careers. And on average, people that work in the STEM industry make 30% more than their non-STEM counterparts. So I'm like, this is great for folks who are tapped in a part of the network. But what about all these people, these really talented people, the potential pools of talent that are left out of all of these opportunities? So in your experience, like, what is the disconnect? Where are the holes in the pipeline? Like, where does this start? Anybody can jump in on that one.
I'll jump in. I think there's two holes. One in particular is at the K-12 level. Is we need to do a better job in collaborating with our K-12 communities and introducing STEM as early as possible and incorporating that into their everyday curriculum. I read a study that by the time a kid is in the second grade, and particularly girls and students of color, they've decided they don't like math. And for sure, by the time you get to the 9th grade, you've already decided what you don't want to do. And so K-12 is a hole. The second hole, in my experience, is in higher education and providing the infrastructure to receive our students of color. Studies show that students of color persist through their learning communities. And when there's isolation, it's tough. And if you have an industry like STEM that's poorly underrepresented, that even shrinks the higher education pool. And so as in higher education, we got to do a better job of creating an infrastructure and an atmosphere that is welcoming to our students. Lastly, I'll say that if you take a look at HBCUs, they're producing in greater numbers Black and Brown students in STEM because of the learning communities. And so I think if we could duplicate what they're doing in that area, we can get our students to graduation at the same rate.
You mean like support, like tutoring, like to help them get through?
Yes. So support, tutoring, clubs, any camaraderie around STEM. And generally that happens not only academically, but socially.
Mm-hmm.
I would add that there's a huge opportunity now, especially on the heels of George Floyd. Lots of companies are stepping up to do the right thing that they should have done historically. And I think there's just an opportunity for increased partnerships with companies and institutions of higher learning. And when I talk about partnerships, I would say sort of incentivization and creating the resources to be able to establish those type of programs. If I was in high school and there was a likelihood I could get a scholarship to a certain school that has a robust program that's been well resourced, that's a great incentive where you can actually attract underrepresented communities into programs like that and then nurture them through those programs by creating the right sort of mentorships, creating the access to jobs by creating the right opportunities for internships, et cetera, all the way on that continuum. And I think that's another way to kind of close the gap. So corporations have an active role to play in addition to institutions of higher learning to make this all happen.
They say there was at MMAC, we had a program for 4th graders where they would go through and see different careers. And there was a child that said that they really appreciated being in the program because you can't be what you can't see. And you know, we say that, you know, I've heard other people say it and say it again and again because it's so important. Like, I remember when I was a kid, because of the Cosby Show, I wanted to be a doctor. Like, what kid didn't want to be, like, I want to be a gynecologist because of the Cosby Show. And so, like, my whole youth, I went through saying, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a doctor. And, you know, I feel like every time I said that, an adult or someone around me would say, woo, you know, you got to be real good at math and science. That's hard. And it's like I heard it so many times that I believed it. And I majored in English. I mean, I just ended up not doing it. So I think about this now with my own kids. So I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I have both of them in mathnasium. Even though, you know, they may or may not really need the tutoring, but I'm just like, I don't want them to feel like this is something that they can't do if they want to do it, you know? So it's an investment that I'm making, but I'm like, I just want them to feel like when they hear anything related to STEM or technology or coding, that it just doesn't become this fuzzy thing and they're like, that's not for me, because it might be. Nadia, did you want to say something?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first, just a quick touch on what you were saying. It really tickled me and it resonated with me. I remember being really young myself. I'm very petite for those that know me, and folks are always trying to push me in direction. You should be a model or whatever. Nothing against modeling. I mean, if the job was offered to me, I probably did. But you know, no one ever looked at my tiny hands or whatever and said like, hey, maybe you should be a surgeon. You can fit those in somebody's chest cavity quite easily. You know what I mean? So I think that, you know, that there is an importance around how we go about branding STEM. I also wanted to piggyback off of what Abim said and sort of take the corporate angle as well. I hear from folks, you know, in college all the time about how hard it is, even though they have a good GPA, to you get hired or even get the interview. And I think that it's time that we hold leadership and executives and people who are in positions of power accountable. I think one of the barriers that currently, unfortunately, still exists is that there are still far too many people in positions of power that at this point, with all of the information that's around, are just willfully ignorant around, you know, the impact of diversity and tech. And what does this mean? It's having them turn their heads to the value that, you know, Black people or people of color bring to this space. You know, they make excuses, they're silent, and unfortunately, they practice this erasure, which I think needs to eventually and as soon as possible, honestly, be addressed. I mean, excuses, when I think of excuses, I think of, you know, the largest search engine in the world, right? Google. Their whole brand is about search, yet they can't seem to find, right, Black people to hire in this space. Excuses. You think of, you know, the Amazons, logistics companies, right? Literally, your brand is logistics. Yeah, you can't figure out how to place Black people in the right positions. It's to me, these excuses have to go, and we have to start holding these large tech companies accountable, because they have the ability to do so. They just haven't prioritized it enough yet. So I'd love to see more action around that in the near future.
Leah, I'm gonna come to you because what Nadia just said makes me think about the email that I sent you guys that we got today at Fuel. There's a parent who has a student about to graduate, junior, and he's frustrated because he can't even get an interview. And I was so surprised, like, there's all this lack of diversity in STEM. Shouldn't people be getting snatched up left and right? Like, how is this possible? You know, that students are having problems attracting interest from companies. And Leah, I know you kind of work in this space and help people get placed. Like, what was your take on that, and what have you seen in the industry?
Yeah, thank you so much, Corey. And I did have a couple things to kind of respond to from Abim and Nadia specifically. I think what they brought to mind for me was around, and it's related to what that concerned parent wrote in as well. You know, I think that, I don't know if it's American culture, or I'm just going to say it, white supremacy culture is really prevalent in corporate America. It's insidious. It doesn't look like what we might think of as white supremacy, but one of those beliefs is individualism and believing, you know, in pulling people up by the bootstraps. And truly, no one gets to the top of any company alone. You know, they get there through connections and through social capital. And so to Nadia's point about some of these giants, still not really improving their diversity numbers, it's going to take collective work. Like, we can't expect that, you know, job seekers are going to come to us as fully formed, you know, professionals that are ready to go. There needs to be a collective investment from the community, rather than saying, you know, it's on you, person who may be coming to us without the same benefits and perks, to skill yourself up and get to the top on your own, because nobody actually does that. They get there through the help and assistance of supportive communities. And so I guess I just want to sort of challenge that mindset of individualism that I think does keep a lot of people out of the tech industry. But to that parent specifically, first of all, I would be just beside myself as well And I guess I would ask them, you know, like, is your child applying for internships or for full-time roles? Because I can say that internships are often like the breeding ground or training ground for full-time employment. And something that I didn't know, and nobody told me because I didn't have, you know, connections in terms of like family members that could get me a job wherever. I honestly was lucky. I went to college, you know, and I happened to see an email at a right time that led me to an internship between junior and senior year of college. And I believe that person that wrote the email, their son was a junior. They might not know that that is a key year. If you've made it into college when you're a rising senior, like that's the year that every company goes after as many college students as they can, is to get an intern during that summer between junior and senior year. And then the ideal is for them to be hired on as a full-time employee after they complete their last year of college. So that's actually what happened with me and how I had a job waiting for me after college. But honestly, it was luck, like seeing an email at a right time. And yes, privilege in terms of being able to get into a great four-year school, and that school having alumni connections to that employer. But it was also like a right place, right time in terms of like, I could have just as easily clicked past that email and I might not be here right now. But so I guess I just want to bring it back to, you know, like the impetus needs to fall very squarely on companies just as much as on the communities around students when they're young, because there needs to be more investment in talent early on to get them to the place where we want them to be. Like, it's not going to happen on its own. And to the point earlier, I think something like only 47% of high schools in the United States teach computer science. So if you want people to come to you with those skills, you may need to teach them those skills. And there's a reality that they may leave you at some point, but if they stay in the region, then we can all win together. And so I guess I'm also echoing Nadia, you know, I want to see more employers stepping up. There's been at least 5 or 6 years of diversity reports from some of the largest tech companies in the world and very little movement on their actual statistics. And given how good they are at a lot of other things, I think they need to get better at, you know, at identifying talent and hiring them.
Yeah, speaking of companies, you know, kind of stepping up and what that looks like, Abim, I know Northwestern Mutual is very visible in this space. What are some of the programs and efforts that you all are putting forth to, you know, diversify and bring more inclusion? Because I mean, maybe that could be a roadmap for other companies that aren't quite sure how to start.
Yeah, no, thanks for that opportunity. Boy, I wish we had a whole hour for this. I mean, certainly we started this journey in terms of developing a diverse and inclusive community and culture within the company. But you have to recognize that you live in a community. And when we start talking about STEM, you have to, in my opinion, adopt innovative ways, out of pattern ways of thinking about this problem. And some of the things that we did included, you know, I'm going to call it kind of the greenhouse effect, right? Where think about incubating and creating the right conditions within the community to meet the needs. So Northwestern Mutual is a participant in sort of Milwaukee as a tech hub. In fact, we were one of the kind of the pioneers around that. And we've collaborated with a couple of other companies around the Milwaukee area to really begin to create the engine to cultivate that. Through our foundation, we've been very active. We have an all-in Milwaukee program that's made about $1.6 million available to be able to, like, you know, pull black and brown kids through a variety of institutions. And then within the company itself, last year, our CEO, John Schlifsky, set up a task force called the Sustained Action for Racial Equity. And I like the fact that we call it sustained, because it's one thing to do these things, but how do you sustain it? And it's made up of about 60 different leaders. And really, there were 4 things. A, culture of inclusion and respect, not only within the company, but how do we also foster that within the community? Talent. You know, some of the things I mentioned, you got to cultivate the right talent within the community so you can attract, retain them. So there's a huge focus on talent. And the third is business innovation and financial security. And, you know, I was involved in the set aside of $20 million for Black founders, including the accelerated program that we started in partnership with Generator. And obviously we've been talking to a few other tech entrepreneurs within the Black community here in Milwaukee. And the last sleeve of that is focusing on partnerships and community. So that's a summary of some of the things we're doing internally, but making sure that we have this greenhouse effect of working within the community, leaders and other companies to say, hey, we don't want to make those excuses about, hey, we can't find enough Black and African-American people. How about if we start planting the seeds here locally and then start watering those seeds and see those seeds, you know, sprout, and we got to create room for them to be able to hire them. But when they come in, how do we make sure we're nurturing them and sustaining them? Yeah. Also, how do we make sure they see people who look like them in higher positions? I mean, think about that whole continuum, and we're working through all that. So if other companies will think about their communities and have that kind of ecosystem or greenhouse approach and begin to proliferate that intentionally, hopefully we will have some success. I'm heartened again by some companies have connected with the HBCUs and established programs and scholarships and ideating with things like this. It just takes a lot of innovative out of the box thinking to be able to address this problem.
Hey, Corey.
Yeah.
So here's a hot take though, that, I do want us to touch on. Black people exist in technology, right? And the problem here, I think that is there's a lot of corporations that, they fixate on, okay, there's a gap, I can't find, but we're here, right? And I think one way that we can embrace this is for these larger corporations, to Adam's earlier point, to partner with Black-led organizations like the Milky Way Tech Hub, like a Young Enterprise Society, like so many other, Black-led organizations, even here in Milwaukee, to develop and advance their diversity, equity, and inclusion. If those partners are not included in the forefront of whatever DEI initiatives that these large corporations have, then their DEI becomes damaging. And that has to be pointed out. And this is another way in which we hold these companies accountable. So when you see these DEI, always ask these organizations, how are you partnering, and how are the Black-led organizations that are putting this work into place already on the ground being incorporated into the solution, so that there's not erasure, because otherwise, again, the DEI becomes quite damaging.
Yeah, we're good. So MMAC is doing a lot of work around diversity and inclusion. And this is a conversation that we had of like, let's tap into the existing organizations, because there are networks of people of color who are already doing this work before we got into it. And we have a larger voice, a larger footprint, and, more resources. And it's counter to what we are trying to do if we don't pull them in and make them a part of it, or at least just leverage what they're already doing and not recreate it. I think that's a really important.
You want to avoid erasure at all costs of Black work.
Also, I'll throw in academia in that picture, because Leah mentioned early on that it's important for our students to get involved in internships. So it's an awesome opportunity for those corporations to groom students who have the early talent, to give them the experience they need prior to accepting a full-time position, is to partner with academia to groom those students of color for their organizations and to retain that talent in the area.
Let's talk a little bit about, and Dr. Goodwin, you can unmute because I'm going to come right back to you. I know you wrote a report about some of the solutions and ways that we can, start to have more inclusion in STEM. So we talk about the pipeline and the holes in the pipeline and the issues, but what are some other things that people can be, and organizations should be looking at or looking to do as a solution?
Yeah, I don't have a full solution. I'm not in corporate, but from an academic point of view, I believe that starting at the K-12 area, as I mentioned earlier, I read an awesome study recently about culturally relevant pedagogy. And it talked about how students of color, when they're in schools that don't have teachers that look like them, there are some issues there in terms of keeping the curriculum relevant to their culture. And it was a study that was conducted in San Francisco with Stanford University. They did a test pilot on some students in that area, over 4,000 students over a 4-cohort period. And what they learned is that students who were at risk of dropping out of high school, which meant that they had a 2.0 GPA or less, they used in this study. And when they adopted a culturally relevant pedagogy, those students flourished. When the curriculum was made relevant, when the teachers understood where they came from and the representation in their community were important, and they tied that to the curriculum, those students flourished. So when I talk about the wholes, it begins at K-12. We've got to get some better partnerships with academia, higher ed, and particularly in the corporations at the K-12 level, and also providing some mentorship and coaching of individuals that look like our students. Mm-hmm. So you gave a great example about how you wanted to be a gynecologist from watching the Huxtables. Well, our kids need to know that the sky is the limit to what they can become. But it's also helpful when you see someone that looks like you. You know, how many of you have gone someplace and you've been the only person of color there? And when someone else walks in the room, you're kind of drawn to them like, hey, how are you? Our students, they have that same draw. So those holes exist, and I believe that those gaps can be filled with higher ed and with the corporations. And not only just putting money into it, is just really investing in these students and providing them some opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Ben, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I saw a question in the chat that, I hopefully, can I talk about it? Yeah, and the question related to, for us to speak to the value of having people of color in tech or STEM. And, from my perspective, there are two great values. Number one is we all know that the workforce is changing. And when we think about the future of work, and the impact technology is having on the workplace and the types of jobs people are going to have in the future, this is extremely relevant. And if we want to make sure that people of color are represented adequately and able to have the jobs that create financial security in the future, we need to make sure we're creating the right pipeline for people of color in the tech economy. So it connects to financial security in the long term. But the other critical advantage from my position, and I had a position in innovation before my new role, is when you think about innovation and you think about technology, fundamentally, we're trying to solve human problems. Technology is a solution to the human problem. And how might you be solving human problems if you don't have diversity in terms of thinking through different lenses about that human problem? And then you create this tech capability, but you haven't thought about Black people, white people, Asians, right? So there's something around diversity in innovation. Technology is a solution in innovation. And you need to have a wide aperture, a wider lens to be able to bring the right solutions to bear on the human problems. So those are two critical advantages. It's not just a nice to have, it's a must have diversity in terms of the pipe. So I thought I would just address that for the person who posted this in the chat.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm wondering, Leah, the students that you work with, you work with mostly high school? Is it?
Nope, they are adults. Sorry.
Okay, good, because that's what I wanted to ask. It feels like a lot of people that I talk to that are kind of new to STEM careers made a shift, like they switched careers. Are you seeing that happen a lot, and sort of what's sparking folks' interest in this?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Yes, I mean, tech it's the next frontier, absolutely. And just as you were doing research, Corey, and noticing, that the most, not just job growth, but in terms of like income potential, it's all in STEM fields. And so I think with the rise of coding boot camps, like my former employer, and IC STARS program is admittedly a bit like a coding boot camp. And I know UW Extension runs one, and a lot of educational institutions are starting to run them. They're trying to respond to a need because there is a need for more technology professionals in the country and in the Midwest. And so there's certainly an appetite for it. The problem is that there are a lot of organizations that want and need tech talent, but they are not accustomed to early talent. And that's really where we run into a bit of a challenge with IC STARS, is that, we're equipping people with skills, but we can't equip them with 5 years of experience. And so if you are looking for tech talent, you're probably going to need to start from the ground up, speaking to employers. And so I know that other, talent development and advocacy organizations in the area have run into the same issue, where we are going to continue to have a talent gap, and also, flight of great talent from the area if there aren't enough early career opportunities for people to start their career in tech here and then stay for a very long period of time. And again, that's really going to take an investment from all different size employers, large and small, in the area. And I do want to give kudos to both Northwestern Mutual, who I know is on this call, and I know MATC does a great job of preparing people for opportunities. And then also, I'm aware of American Families Programming as well, and they both have robust internship programming and aren't necessarily as picky for, or I guess they don't require degrees, which is something that really hits home for my participants and myself, because they largely don't have degrees. And so there's definitely potential to get into tech, but the reception of the local market in terms of technology employers, is kind of make or break in terms of somebody could go into a program and get all of these skills, but if there's not somebody waiting on the other side who's ready to hire them, then what are they really getting that training for? Why not leave to go to another place? And of course, that's not what we want. That's not what the MMAC wants. But again, it's going to be a collective effort to create a solution to that problem.
Right now, who has the ear of the employers? Like employers that just aren't, aware of the problems or the disconnects, or aren't meeting the needs, or don't have programs that allow for this young talent or burgeoning talent to kind of come in. And is there a symposium, or like what exists in this world that can help bring companies up to speed? Or are they looking at peer, like Abim, are you getting companies that are like coming to you saying, we don't know what to do, give us, because I'm trying to get a sense of like, how do you bridge the gaps that exist?
Yeah, well, some companies certainly have approached us. You can't do it by yourself, but it's identifying, a starting point is identifying the common needs, right? We all need to sort of have this, younger, more diverse, with sharpened skills kind of workforce. So again, I use the Milwaukee as a tech hub as an example of how Northwestern Mutual was at the forefront, but worked with other companies who had the same kind of common problems. And I think that's a model that's going to serve the Milwaukee area very well, and hopefully will be replicated in different areas. So, it's a collaboration. If we want to make this a thriving community that people want to move here to and live, we have to lock arms, for-profit, not-for-profit, schools, corporations. And I'm heartened by what I'm seeing, but I do know we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, by the time the views on this video start to wane down, over 1,000 people will have seen this, either on Facebook or here live or through our website or YouTube. So, I mean, most of Fuel's audience are professionals of all different levels, some HR. I mean, I think this conversation is so valuable. I'm going to send this link to everybody. Get in your companies and start talking about this. Get with the leadership. There's clear gaps here, and not necessarily built-in mechanisms to fix this. So then we're the fixers, right? So you have an interest in this conversation. Let's not just let it be conversation. Let's go back to our workplaces and really make sure that we advocate for this talent to be a part of our companies. I'm going to go to the questions right now. So there's one question I'm going to read. If you have a question, put it in the Q&A if you can, because I'll see it easier if you go to the Q&A section. If you want to send a love note to our panelists because they are really dropping the mic, you know what I mean? You can do that in the chat so that they can see you. So this is a question from a librarian. He or she says, how can we as librarians support or create pipelines for the youth to encounter and explore STEM within programs? Are there any that you're familiar with? So these libraries have, a good pool of talent. Do you know of any programs that connect with libraries or partnerships that could potentially be in the works for a library system?
Well, I know MPL actually did a program a couple of summers ago. Obviously, it didn't happen last year because of the pandemic. I think most of the libraries were closed, but Milwaukee Public Library actually did some pretty cool programming a couple programs at each library, like our MPL locations throughout the entire summer. And it was about building games, so like video games, just because that's like a really easy and relatable way for kids to like understand what they're building. And then at the end, it was part of like a mini pitch competition where, you know, the winning kid got like a gift card. And that was really cool and innovative. And I just want to give props to Milwaukee Public Libraries for already doing something like that. But I think Nadia runs programming related to K through 12 in STEM.
I do. Well, I was just going to suggest, I mean, something that I think you might be able to put in place quite easily. I'm pretty sure you can configure like what tabs pop up automatically when somebody clicks on a browser. It would be great if like you automatically by default have a code.org tab up, right? Which is an incredible website, a resource for young folks to learn how to code. So just little simple things like that can really help. And then of course, partnering with the Milky Way Tech Hub and you know, different organizations that.
Tell us, what is the Milky Way Tech Hub, and tell us what is Jet Constellation?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So Jet Constellations is a for-profit. It's a software company offering affordable software to specific demographics, Black and Brown demographics. And the Milky Way Tech Hub is our social impact arm, and it aims to realize the vision that Milwaukee is not just a tech hub or a tech ecosystem, but one where Black people, people of color, women, and underrepresented backgrounds can thrive. And so we focus on 3 pillars: STEM education, entrepreneurship, and community. And we've made so many incredible partnerships locally and nationally. And I just want to give a shout out to one of our presenting partners, American Family, for being such an incredible corporate ally and helping us to transform Milwaukee into an inclusive tech hub, in short.
That's awesome. Okay, another question from Monique. How do you deal with workplace culture when our STEM students of color get there? Do we see a welcoming workplace and mentoring relationships similar to the majority students? And how can this change? So kind of what does it look like in the workplace right now when there's not a lot of diversity already, and then here you come. What's been your experience? What have you seen? Feedback, stories that you've heard?
Well, I could share a quick story from me. And unfortunately, not much has changed from my experience. On my first internship, I thought I was doing an incredible job. You know, at the end of every summer internship, you're supposed to get up and pitch in front of the executives. I get up there, I do that. I come down, I think, okay, I did great. They're gonna hire me again. Everyone's saying, Nadia, you did a great job. Good job over the last 3 months. Great pitch. And then my boss knocks on my door and says, hey, can you come into this little small room called Enclave? No windows. And then says, you know what? We got to do something about your hair. It was really distracting the whole time. Thank you for that face. Extremely, extremely disappointing. And it was my first sort of entry point into the corporate world in the tech space. And, you know, in that moment, of course, I felt like, God, I don't belong here. I'm out of here, right? And it's those moments right there that unfortunately make a lot of folks pivot outside of tech. Thankfully, I continued on and persisted. But that culture, unfortunately, and Leah said it, you know, white supremacy is real, and it's all throughout the tech industry. And, you know, there's unfortunately not a whole lot of solutioning just yet on how to eradicate it in this space. And so it does make it very difficult and challenging. And again, it just points to why representation in the space is so important.
Yeah, I was going to share that. Certainly the work is not done. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done, but a few things that we're doing at Northwestern Mutual. The first is focus and emphasis on leaders, right? Leaders kind of make the place for, you know, young people that might come to work. And it is no longer tolerable for you to be a leader who does not have diversity as a leadership competency. Again, we have some work to do, but we're being very, very intentional in the sense of you're more likely to lead diverse teams over the course of your career, and you have to know how to do it. And it's not you take a D&I hat, you put it on and off. It's something that should be woven into your fabric of leadership. So we've been very intentional. So that's number one. The second is, how do you then create an environment outside of the leader himself or herself? And this is something our CEO is very passionate about. We have, Black and other sort of employee resource groups that, is a community that one can kind of plug in. And I'm a part of the African American Employee Resource Group at Northeastern Mutual, and that group has grown, and now we have about 9 employee resource groups, Asian, disability, etc. That begins to create, when you look at it holistically, begins to create that environment of inclusion and diversity. So again, there's a lot of work to be done, but starting with leaders and making that it's untenable to not have to think about how to develop those leadership skills to create the right conditions.
As we're getting close to wrapping up here, I kind of want to bring it back to the film Coded Bias that sort of sparked this conversation, or was really the inspiration for us to have the conversation. And I'm just wondering, what examples have you seen of products or things that have actually come to market that sort of reflect that there was clearly a lack of diversity in the thinking and the development of this? I mean, we see this kind of all the time in like marketing and, billboards and commercials. And it's like, okay, clearly that was not a diverse team that put together this messaging. But I thought this film was so interesting because people who aren't in the tech world or in that field don't realize how the impact of, something as significant as like facial recognition, and, there's evidence that it doesn't work well on people of color, and people are suffering as a result of it. You can speak to that example or any others that you've seen, because I think it's really important for us to bring it home. I mean, there's things that we're using and exposed to every day that impact us.
I'll go.
Yeah,
I'm chomping at the bit for this one.
Okay.
It just hasn't been until recently, I'll say maybe the last 5 to 10 years, where beauty products and hair care products haven't been tailored towards women of color. And, growing up as a kid, even through college, you had to use whatever you could find to shampoo and style your hair with very limited options. And I believe that's an excellent example of the lack of diversity at those companies that just has a one-size-fits-all type of product. That is slowly but surely changing as people of color are developing their own product lines. But I believe overall, as some of these giants create these beauty products, that it lacks diversity because they haven't quite totally figured out what people of color need in their makeup, in their hair, and etc. And so if they created a one-size-fit-all for those products.
Mm-hmm.
And I could just add from the tech standpoint, I really do relate to what you're saying, Kamala. From the tech standpoint, I mean, the film Coded Bias, right, as the young lady shared in the trailer, it surfaced because she was using facial recognition technology that big tech uses, right? And it didn't recognize her beautiful dark skin, but when she put on a white mask, right, it recognized her. And so when I shared this with someone recently, they were like, oh, well, I mean, what's the big deal, right? It's the algorithm. Okay, all right, so sure, then maybe your phone won't open up or unlock, right, if you hold it in front of your face. Okay, well, that's a problem, right? But as technology advances and we're thinking about automated cars, right, self-driving cars rather, I've learned that right now, as they test it, these cars are more likely to hit Black people, right? So, I mean, that's one instance. I mean, let's take it back, right, a little bit, and talk about what, how artificial intelligence and technology is impacting the financial sector, right? And how we go about using AI to allocate credit and risk. And if there are biases built into these machine learning models, what impact does that have on the Black community, right? So this is when it becomes extremely critical to our overall advancement, right? For us to be in these rooms where our data is being monetized, right? We have to be there. Otherwise, these biases are built in and it ends up taking a toll. And I would encourage you all to watch Coded Bias, but another one of my favorite is Hidden Figures. There's a scene in this movie, Hidden Figures, where one of the brilliant women went to the library and asked for a book, I think it was Cobalt, and it was in the whites only section. And I think that went over a lot of folks' heads, right? But there's a reason for that, right? And so I think we just have to address like what currently is happening and how it continues to persist and how we can work together to fix these things, right? Otherwise, we're in trouble. We're just in trouble as a Black community.
Completely. I was just add very quickly that to me, it's the tragedy, the unfortunate tragedy in the approach to innovation, or to flip it, the extreme opportunity in your approach to innovation. And that basically means when you're innovating with a new product or service, obviously you test it on your consumers. And you don't have only one consumer base, but the failure to have tested this with a diverse set of consumers, the failure to have had a diverse team of people as you are innovating towards those products and services is what yields those types of results. So, my charge is, as we think about innovation, it's not just a nice word to have and say, but the practice of innovation is the essence, the ingredient is the diversity of thought in itself at the table while you're innovating that enables you to have products and services that meets the wants and needs of your consumer base.
Absolutely.
Corey, I just like to add one more thing. Since we're in the midst of COVID and the vaccination process, since I'm a nerdy academic, I have to go on to say that the lack of representation in the testing trials, just because our Black and Brown populations don't trust the scientists, is powerful as well. And it further dictates that we need more representation in those areas as well, because when we see others that look like us, then we trust a bit more.
And I think I think we're ending like right now, but I did want to acknowledge that I love the film, and I literally threw my hands in the air when I heard them say at the end how the next frontier with algorithmic justice is around HR and applicant tracking systems, because there are a lot of biases present in that as well when it comes to hiring decisions. And I think it has a lot to do with why we still fail to see a lot of movement for Black and Brown and other underrepresented candidates in the STEM field, but in pretty much every field. So I think that, it's scary that so few people really know how algorithms work, and yet we give them all this unquestioned authority. And as the film said at the very end, people would get turned down over and over again if they were a woman or if they had a foreign sounding last name. And so, the right people might be getting counted out for an opportunity at your organization if you're not willing to question those tracking systems. I know they help with efficiency, but just saying, I guess we have to examine a lot, and we have a long way to go.
Two quick questions before we close. There was a question in the chat about, do any of you know if there are summer youth internships or programs in STEM that folks can take advantage of? Just off the top of your head, if you can rattle off anything you know about, think about that. And then the last question will be, what can all of us do to help encourage the kids around us to pursue STEM careers? So first we'll take any summer internship programs, and then we'll do the second question.
I'll speak up. I can't rattle off exactly where all those, but I do know for sure at Northwestern Mutual, we definitely have those summer internship opportunities. Welcome the opportunity to share. I just can't rattle off the exact number and what.
How do people, what is, if you go to the Northwestern Mutual website, who do they reach out to? What's the name of the program? Who's the contact person? Kind of give them idea. Is there a tech area on the site?
Yeah, so I think what I can do right now is maybe provide the name of James Hishke as sort of the kind of person who is the coordinator with Milwaukee as a tech hub at Northwestern Mutual. And he's a person who obviously can be a pipeline into HR and, you know, where those opportunities would be.
Perfect.
So
I was going to say also, I think MPS, among others, does do earn and learn summer internships. And I just saw Molly Schuld on the bottom here. I believe she runs the high tech, which is like the K through 12 STEM programming for NM. So that program is called High Tech at Northwestern Mutual, like high, like HI, and then tech.
Okay.
But yeah, also MPS, Earn and Learn. And I would also encourage people to check out the Milwaukee Tech Hub website, because I imagine that some of the member employers, they have a lot of members now from where they started a few years ago. And so mketech.org should have some opportunities as well. And I want to also make a plug for youth apprenticeship, because I'm a huge advocate of apprenticeship overall. I think it's an excellent employment pathway for young people or career changers. And I'm proud to say that 3 IC STARS graduates, 1 already is a data analyst apprentice, and 2 are going to be starting with Kohl's next month as technology apprentices. So kudos to employers that are taking that step in apprenticeship. I'd love to see more Milwaukee area employers do that, but there's also youth apprenticeship. So I think you could go to search the Wisconsin Bureau of Apprenticeship website, and youth apprenticeship is something that a lot more companies have gotten involved with from the high tech perspective than registered apprenticeship, which is for adults. So check out the Bureau of Apprenticeship for Wisconsin as well.
That's awesome.
In terms of encouragement for students, I recommend summer STEM camps and also Saturday STEM camps. MSOE has a great infrastructure, as well as an organization called Beyond STEM. And I'm sure Nadia is very aware of Beyond STEM. And those organizations provide some supplemental activities for students who are interested in STEM or whose parents want to expose them to the opportunity.
Yes, yes, I love Beyond STEM. We've partnered with them in the past. I'd also recommend visiting MilkyWayTechHub.com to learn more about our STEAM and DREAM program. Our partnership with American Family, Connect Business Consulting, and Sherman Phoenix. We've also offered some incredible programming, especially as students have had to transition to e-learning over the last year. And I think it's just really important in general to see the value in Black-led tech hubs. Black tech hubs matter, and we prioritize and center Black people and Black youth and people of color. And so when the resources comes towards these sorts of initiatives, Black tech hubs, Milky Way Tech Hub, then we're able to curate programming that again continues to encourage and funnels young folks into STEM careers. So Black tech hubs matter.
Hashtag. This has been amazing. I want to thank all of the panelists. We got lots of comments. So I think what I would do in the chat is I'm going to save the chat and make sure that I send it to you all so you can take a look at it, because there's some love notes and some comments and some stuff that I think would be good for you to just see. A few questions in there that we didn't get to, and I'll pull some of those out. But I've learned so much. If you've learned something and you're still here in the chat, go ahead and leave a comment and thank the panelists for all that they do. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your commitment to Milwaukee and our talent here. I'm so glad.
Thanks so much. It was a great pleasure.
So
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Guys, don't forget to go to the Milwaukee Film website and check out their program, and they have lots of great films and discussions celebrating Black history. And today is all about STEM. So if you want to check out some more conversations, go to the Milwaukee Film Facebook page, and you can watch those conversations live. Lee, were you going to?
And I do want to plug. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, do watch Coded Bias and check out the curriculum that Nadia wrote specifically for that film. If you're watching it with young children, it's kind of a scary topic. So I recommend you know, going through that with them. I want to plug what she's doing, and also to her point, you know, her programming and Young Enterprising Society. They're two amazing organizations here in Milwaukee that are Black-led and definitely uplifting the community from within.
Young Enterprising Society. So it's, yes, but what's the website? I wish I had time.
I'll put it in the Facebook comments, like in Facebook after, because I can't even.
Okay.
Yeah, I will look them up on Instagram. They're very active on social media.
Yes, okay.
They are.
Yes.
Perfect. That's wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. I know you got to get back to work. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
I see somebody posted it. It's followtheyes.com. But
Okay.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You guys be on it in the comments.